Tank tops aren't regulation, sweetheart. Cover that up. You're making the real soldiers nervous." The words cut through the air, but Eden Wolf didn't flinch. She continued cleaning the weapon with cold precision. Then, as her shoulder shifted, the tattoo came into view. Skull, anchor, trident, SEAL Team 6. 3 names etched beneath it, names too heavy to ignore. The room went silent. General Marcus Keene stepped forward, his gaze locked on the tattoo, his breath caught. He recognized it. The question burned in his mind. Who was Eden Wolf, and why did her past have the power to change everything? Her past was buried for a reason. But now, it's about to be uncovered. This is VeteranBiker. Comment 1 if you're new, 2 if you've been with us, 3 if you ride with us every week. Like, subscribe, and stay to the end. The hot Arizona sun beat down on the Fort Arcadia military base, where the constant hum of drills and weapons maintenance filled the air. Soldiers moved with purpose, their boots thudding on the dry ground as they performed their routines. Amid all the movement, Eden Wolf stood apart, a solitary figure, almost invisible despite her presence in plain sight. She wasn't wearing the standard uniform of a soldier. Instead, she wore an olive green tank top, faded and weathered, paired with a work jacket that hung loosely from one shoulder. She wasn't part of the ranks. Not anymore. Her hands moved methodically over the M4 rifle before her, expertly stripping it down for cleaning. Each motion was deliberate, precise, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. No one around her seemed to take much notice. She was a contractor, just another pair of hands in the armory, cleaning weapons, tuning rifles, keeping things running. But there was something different about Eden, something that set her apart, even if no one dared ask. As she adjusted her grip on the rifle's barrel, the sleeve of her jacket slid down slightly. It wasn't much, just a subtle movement, but it was enough. The faint outline of a tattoo on her left shoulder caught the light. A skull, an anchor, and a trident, the unmistakable emblem of SEAL Team 6, etched in black ink, sharp and bold. Beneath it, 3 names, barely visible, but there all the same. The names weren't just ink, they were the ghosts of her past. Names that still held weight. Names that, when spoken aloud, carried the burden of lives lost in the shadows of classified missions. The atmosphere in the room shifted. A few heads turned, but they didn't say anything, not yet. They'd seen her around. They knew Eden was good at her job, damn good in fact. But none of them had really looked at her, not the way they were looking now. They saw her the way they saw the weapons they maintained, as tools, necessary but easily overlooked. But now they couldn't look away. A young private, a fresh-faced recruit, dropped his cleaning rod as his eyes fixed on the tattoo. He froze, mouth slightly ajar. His gaze flicked nervously to his buddy, who had been standing nearby. The second soldier's eyes went wide. He leaned in, whispering something to his friend. Then, slowly, the room fell quiet. One by one, the soldiers stopped moving. The quiet murmur of their activities tapered off, leaving only the sound of Eden's steady, rhythmic cleaning. It wasn't the kind of attention any soldier wanted. The kind that made you feel like you were on display, like everyone was watching and waiting for you to make a mistake. But Eden didn't flinch. She didn't acknowledge the growing tension in the room, the sudden silence that was spreading like wildfire. She simply continued working. "Hey, Wolf!" a voice called from the back. It was Sergeant Travis Rock, the one who often led drills, always loud, always brash. His grin was wide, his tone mocking. "Pretty sure you missed a spot on the latrine door yesterday. Want me to draw you a diagram?" He was trying to rattle her, trying to make her crack. Eden didn't look up. She didn't even pause in her cleaning. Just another jab, another attempt to undermine her, make her feel small. Rock kept going, his voice rising slightly. "What's the matter, Wolf? Too busy pretending to be tough to do your job?" He flicked a rag toward her, landing it on the table in front of her. A few soldiers laughed, a low, nervous chuckle. It was all part of the game. They thought she was weak, a woman pretending to fit in with men who had earned their place in the field. But Eden didn't bite. She never did. Her hands moved with practiced ease, snapping the parts of the rifle back into place with a soft click. No words, no confrontation, just focus. She was used to this. The snide comments, the assumptions, the way they looked at her like she didn't belong. It had been the same since she'd joined the military back when no one thought a woman could make it through the grueling SEAL training. That was before they saw what she was capable of, before they saw her survive the impossible. And now they saw her as a contractor, just another name on a roster, cleaning weapons in the back of an armory. But they didn't know her, not really. They didn't know the scars that ran deeper than skin. They didn't know the ghosts she carried. "Good job, Wolf," Rock called out again, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he walked away. His crew of soldiers snickered. It didn't bother Eden. She was used to it. She had long since learned to ignore the noise. But what she couldn't ignore was the figure that appeared at the top of the stairs leading into the armory. The polished boots, the posture, the way everyone seemed to freeze at the sight of him. General Marcus Keene. Eden didn't flinch, though she could feel the change in the room. She kept her gaze on the rifle in front of her, focused, undeterred. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. She could sense it in the way the air seemed to thicken, the way the soldiers around her straightened, their eyes flicking to the general as he descended the stairs. His boots made no sound, but the weight of his presence filled the room. "Sergeant Rock," Keene's voice was low, commanding, "clear the area. I need to speak with Wolf." The room seemed to grow even quieter, if that was possible. Rock shot Eden a curious glance, but didn't argue. He motioned for the soldiers to clear out. Within moments, the armory was empty, save for Eden and the general. Eden didn't move. She didn't acknowledge him at first, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, when she did look up, their eyes met, and something shifted. Recognition. "Eden Wolf," General Keene said, his voice quieter now, almost reverent. "It's been a long time." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the past. She didn't answer, didn't offer a greeting or an explanation. Instead, she went back to the rifle before her, carefully inspecting the bolt carrier, her hands steady and precise. Keene took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her. "You haven't changed much," he said, almost to himself. He watched her for a moment, as if seeing a ghost from the past. His voice grew softer, tinged with disbelief. "I thought you were gone, Wolf. Thought you'd never come back." Eden didn't answer. She didn't need to. She hadn't been gone. She had just been waiting for the ghosts to stop haunting her, waiting for the past to stop following her. And now, with the general standing in front of her, she couldn't escape it any longer. The ghosts were back. "Tell me," Keene's voice was firm now, like he was giving an order, though he knew she didn't take orders anymore. "Tell me what happened, why you left." Eden took a deep breath. She looked at him, her eyes steady, calm, and in that moment, she knew. He wasn't just asking about the past, he was asking for something more. He was asking for the truth about who she really was. But Eden had no intention of telling him everything. Not yet. Not until the time was right. "Some stories are better left untold," she finally said, her voice soft but unwavering. And with that, the tension in the room seemed to shift, settling into a quiet understanding. The general stood still for a moment, his eyes searching hers as if trying to read her soul. And then, with a single nod, he turned and walked away. As his footsteps faded, the weight of his presence lingered in the room. The ghosts hadn't gone anywhere. They never did. Eden stood up, wiped her hands on the rag beside her, and turned her attention back to the rifle in front of her. The work wasn't done. It never was. The armory was quiet again. The faint echo of boots on concrete faded, leaving only the sound of Eden's steady breathing as she resumed her task. The rifle on her workbench lay in front of her, a silent companion in the stillness of the room. She methodically checked each component, tightening screws, ensuring the alignment was flawless. Everything had to be perfect. It was almost soothing, the routine, the silence, the precise movements. She was used to this, used to the loneliness, the solitude of working on the same rifles day in and day out, without anyone really knowing who she was, without anyone asking questions. But that was changing now. The presence of General Marcus Keene had shifted everything. The air felt heavier, the silence less comforting. She could still feel his eyes on her. Even now, with him long gone, she felt the weight of his gaze lingering, the recognition, the question, who was she really? The truth was, Edenwolf had been gone for a long time. She had walked away from her past, buried it under layers of sand and dirt, hidden it behind the walls she had built around herself. But now, with just a glance at her tattoo, it all came rushing back. The years she spent as a ghost, the missions, the names, all of it. The tattoo, the names, they weren't just reminders. They were anchors. They kept her grounded, even when everything else seemed to slip away. The question was simple. Could she stay hidden forever? Or would the past eventually catch up with her? Eden's hands stopped moving. Her mind drifted, and for a moment she let herself think. Think about the past. Think about the men whose names were etched on her skin, men who had died long before their time, men who had fought alongside her and in the end had fallen in the line of duty. Marcus Chen, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross. Those names meant more to her than anything, more than the missions, more than the medals, more than the years she spent in the shadows. They were her brothers. They were the reason she had done what she had done, and they were the reason she hadn't walked away from everything. But now, as the memories resurfaced, Eden felt the weight of their loss more than ever. She had tried to bury it, to forget, but every mission, every rifle she cleaned, every day she spent in silence reminded her of them. Her eyes flickered to the door of the armory, and for a brief moment she wondered if she should leave. Walk away, once and for all, leave Fort Arcadia behind, leave the ghosts of her past behind. But she couldn't, not yet. Not while there were still questions to be answered. Not while there were still ghosts to confront. The sound of footsteps broke her thoughts. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. It was him again. General Marcus Keene. He stepped into the armory with a slow, measured gait, his boots quiet on the concrete. This time, he didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. The tension in the air was thick enough to suffocate anyone who dared to break it. He stood there for a moment, observing her in silence. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the tools, the rifles, the meticulous work she had been doing. Then, without a word, he moved closer. "Eden," he said, his voice low but firm, carrying an authority she couldn't ignore. "I need answers." She didn't respond at first. She didn't need to. She knew what he wanted. She knew what he had come for. "You don't need to say anything," Keene continued, his tone shifting slightly. "I know the story. I know what happened." Eden's fingers tightened around the rifle in front of her. She couldn't look at him, not yet. Not until she was ready to face the truth. "You think you know," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the sound of her breathing. "But you don't. No one does." The room was still again, save for the hum of the lights overhead. For a long moment, neither of them moved, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched thick and suffocating until finally Eden spoke again. "You want to know who I am?" Her voice was calm, but there was a bite to it now, something cold and final. "I'm just a woman cleaning rifles, nothing more." The words hung in the air, but she knew they weren't true. Not really. She wasn't just a woman cleaning rifles. She was something else, something more. But for now, that was all she was willing to admit. Keen stood in front of her, studying her, as if trying to read the unspoken words in her expression. The years of training, of missions, of survival. He had seen it all before, but there was something about Eden that made him pause. Something about her presence that made the room feel different. "You don't have to hide anymore, Eden," he said, his voice softer now. "You don't have to be the ghost. Not with me. Not anymore." The words struck her harder than she had expected. For a brief moment she felt something stir inside her. A flicker of hope, of relief, of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. But she quickly shut it down. She couldn't let herself feel that way. Not yet. Not until she had finished what she had started. "I'm not hiding," she replied, her voice steady though the words felt hollow. "I've never been hiding. I've just been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Keen asked, his gaze piercing. Eden met his eyes for the first time since he entered. The look in her eyes was cold, calculating, but there was something else there too. A flicker of something she hadn't allowed anyone to see in a long time. "For the ghosts to stop following me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The tension in the room thickened, but neither of them spoke again. Keen understood. He had known what it was like to be haunted by the past. He had his own ghosts, his own regrets, but what he saw in Eden was different. She wasn't just running from her past, she was carrying it. She was carrying it for everyone who had fallen with her, for every soul, lost on those missions that never made it into the history books. Eden turned her attention back to the rifle in front of her, her hands moving once more with practiced ease. "We'll talk later," she said, her voice firm, a wall built up around her once more. "When I'm ready." And with that, General Marcus Keen turned and left, his footsteps echoing in the distance. Eden didn't look up. She didn't need to. The ghosts had come, and they weren't leaving any time soon. The days following General Keen's visit were a blur of routine. Eden continued her work at the armory with the same methodical precision, each motion smooth, calculated, and deliberate. Nothing changed on the surface. The soldiers came and went, the weapons were cleaned, the drills carried on, but beneath it all, there was a tension, a subtle shift in the air that no one spoke of. Eden could feel it. She could always feel when things were about to change. Each time she walked through the armory doors, she caught the eye of another soldier, a glance that lingered a moment too long. The whispers behind her back had grown louder. They no longer made jokes about her. Now it was different. Now it was respect mixed with uncertainty, a fear of something they couldn't quite name. The tattoo on her shoulder was no longer just a mark on her skin. It was a symbol of something more, something dangerous. She could sense their unease, the way they moved just a little faster when she passed by, the way they turned their heads as if they were trying to see if the rumors were true. It didn't bother her. It didn't make her nervous. It made her feel ready. Ready for the moment when everything would come crashing down. On the fourth morning after Keen's visit, Eden was back in the armory as always, alone before the rest of the base woke up. The rifle in front of her gleamed in the harsh fluorescent lights, its metal cold against her fingertips. The hum of the lights, the soft clink of tools as she worked, was the only sound in the room. That was when the door opened again. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. This time it wasn't the general, it wasn't anyone important, it was Sergeant Rock. His footsteps were heavy on the floor, his presence loud even before he spoke. "You know," he said, leaning against the doorframe, "it's not too late to stop pretending." Eden didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. She just kept working, her fingers moving over the rifle with the same careful precision. "Everyone's talking about it," Rock continued, his voice louder now, the challenge in his tone evident. "Your tattoo, the stories, people want answers." Eden paused, but only for a fraction of a second. Her eyes stayed fixed on the weapon in front of her, and her hands didn't waver. "I'm not interested in their stories," she said quietly, "and I'm not interested in yours." Rock didn't seem to be fazed by her response. He took a step closer, his shadow falling across her workbench. "You know," he said, this time softer, almost like he was trying to make a point, "I've heard about Ghost Team Delta. I've heard the rumors, the legends, but none of that matters, not if you can't prove it." Eden finally looked up. Her eyes met his, but there was no anger there, no frustration, just cold, silent understanding. "I don't need to prove anything," she replied. "Not to you." Rock smirked, clearly trying to get under her skin. "You don't think I know? I know a fraud when I see one, Wolf. And I know there's more to you than cleaning rifles and being a ghost. Everyone else does too." Her grip tightened around the rifle, but her voice remained calm. "I've told you already. I'm not hiding. I'm just waiting," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Waiting for what? For the ghosts to come back? Is that it? Because I've seen enough people like you. You don't just disappear and come back with a tattoo like that and think nobody's going to ask questions." Eden's gaze didn't waver, and her hands didn't stop moving. She placed the rifle back on the bench, her fingers brushing over the cold metal. "I'm not like everyone else, Rock, and I never was." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Rock seemed to consider her words. Finally, he spoke again, quieter this time. "You're not like anyone I've ever met, but that doesn't mean you can't be the real deal." Eden didn't respond. She didn't need to. There was nothing more to say. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the sound of the base coming to life filled the air. Soldiers started to trickle into the armory, beginning their daily routines. But even with the distractions around her, Eden couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something big. Something she wasn't ready for but would have to face anyway. And then, the door to the armory opened again. This time, it wasn't Rock. It was General Keene. He didn't look surprised to see her. In fact, he seemed to have been expecting her to be here, as though he knew the armory would be the one place where she would be. Alone, unbothered. The perfect place for her to bury herself in the work she knew so well. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Eden kept her focus on the rifle in front of her, but she could feel the general's eyes on her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, the silent questions he had been holding back ever since he first recognized her. "You've been here long enough," he said finally, his voice low but steady, "and I've been waiting long enough to know the truth." Eden didn't flinch. She didn't stop working. She didn't say anything. Keene's eyes narrowed, but there was no anger in them, only curiosity. A kind of desperate need to understand. "You were never meant to be forgotten, Eden," he said. "Your name, your team, the things you did, it all matters, and I'm not letting you hide from it anymore." Eden paused. This time, she met his gaze. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time, truly understanding what he was offering. "I'm not hiding," she said softly. "I never was. I just had to learn how to live with it." Keen stepped forward, his eyes fixed on her. The tension between them was palpable, heavy with everything unsaid, with all the years she had spent trying to bury what had happened. "It's time to come back," he said. "To stop pretending, to stop hiding. You're needed." Eden didn't speak. She didn't have to. She didn't know if she was ready to answer his call. She didn't know if she ever would be. But what she did know was that she couldn't stay in the shadows forever, and maybe, just maybe, it was time for the ghosts to stop haunting her. The hum of the bass seemed louder that day. It wasn't the usual noise, the drills, the sounds of soldiers moving. Between buildings, the faint rattle of equipment being tested. This time, it was different. It felt like the air itself was charged, as if something big was about to happen, and everyone knew it. Eden stood in the armory, her hands steady as she worked, the familiar weight of a rifle in her hands. The rifle was a tool, a means to an end, but it was also a reminder of everything she had been, everything she had done. General Keen had made his move. He had put his cards on the table, and now Eden was left to decide what to do with it. Could she return to what she had once been? Could she step back into a world of shadows and secrets, a world that had once cost her everything? "Ready, Wolf." The voice came from behind her, and she didn't need to turn to know who it was. Rock. His tone was no longer mocking. There was something else in it now, something that hadn't been there before. It was respect, but it was also something else, something darker. Eden didn't answer him. She didn't need to. She simply grabbed the next rifle in line, a bolt-action sniper rifle, and started checking its scope. Her eyes were fixed on the weapon, but she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "Everyone's talking about it," Rock continued, his voice softer now. "About you. About what you used to be." Eden didn't flinch. She just tightened the screws on the rifle and set it back down. She was done with words, done with the whispers. All that mattered now was the task at hand, the mission ahead. "You know what's coming, right?" Rock asked, his voice just above a whisper. "They want to know if you're the real deal. They want to know if you still have it." Eden paused, but only for a moment. She knew what he was asking. It wasn't about proving anything to him. It was about proving something to herself. "I'm not here to prove anything," she said quietly, her eyes still focused on the rifle in front of her. "I'm here to do my job." Rock didn't say anything after that. He didn't need to. They both knew what was at stake now. There was no turning back. The next day, everything changed. General Keen had called a meeting. He didn't say why, but it didn't take long for the soldiers to figure it out. Eden was back in the field. She had been called up for a special mission, a mission that required her unique set of skills. The briefing room was packed. Officers, soldiers, all of them standing at attention, waiting for the details. But none of them could look away from Eden as she stepped into the room. Her presence was undeniable. It wasn't just the way she walked, or the way she moved with a calm confidence that radiated through the space. It was something deeper, something that made everyone in the room stand a little straighter, hold their breath just a little longer. General Keen stood at the front of the room, his back straight, his expression unreadable. He glanced at Eden, then back at the group of soldiers. "This mission is classified," he began, his voice low and steady. "It's high risk, and it requires a team that is capable of operating in the shadows. A team that is capable of making decisions without the luxury of time." Eden remained silent, her gaze unwavering as she listened. The mission was one of the most dangerous kind, a covert operation in a hostile territory. involving high-profile targets, the kind of mission where there were no guarantees. "We need someone who's been there," Keane continued. "Someone who's walked through the fire and come out the other side." The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the soldiers spoke up. "General, with all due respect, we've trained for this. We're ready." Keane's eyes flicked toward the soldier, but there was no softness in his gaze. Only steel. "I'm not concerned about readiness," he said sharply. "I'm concerned about who will survive when it's over." The tension in the room was palpable. Every eye was on Eden now, and she could feel it. The weight of their expectations. The unspoken question that hung in the air, would she be able to do it again? "I've got this," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a statement. It was a promise. Later that evening, Eden stood on the tarmac, her bag packed, her gear loaded. The hum of the helicopter was the only sound that filled the air, cutting through the night. The soldiers around her were silent, their eyes focused on the mission ahead. But Eden was already somewhere else. Her mind was in the past, in the dark corners of the world where she had once fought, and where she would fight again. Her past wasn't something she could escape. It was part of her, woven into the fabric of who she was. She had tried to bury it, to forget it. But now, as the helicopter blades spun above her, she knew that running was no longer an option. She had to face it. She had to face them, the ghosts, and they were coming with her. As the helicopter lifted off the ground, Eden looked out over the base, the lights of the camp flickering below. She couldn't help but wonder how much longer she could keep running, from the past, from the truth. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to let the ghosts walk beside her. The mission ahead was dangerous. But for Eden, it was just another step into the fire, and she was ready for it. Ready to prove that the ghosts didn't own her. Ready to show them that she could still do what she had always done best: survive. The journey to the target site was long and treacherous. The night was their ally, but it was also their enemy. Darkness could hide them, but it could also blind them. Every mile they traveled brought them closer to the unknown, to the chaos that would follow. As they neared the drop zone, Eden's mind sharpened. The years of training, the missions, the losses, everything she had been through led up to this moment. She had faced death before. She had watched her brothers fall in the line of duty. She had held their bodies in her arms, knowing that there was nothing she could do to change it. But tonight, there would be no time for reflection, no time for regret. Her focus was razor sharp, her instincts honed to perfection. There would be no second chances, not this time. 5 minutes out, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Eden nodded, tightening her grip on the rifle in her hands. She could hear the others preparing, checking their gear, but she didn't need to check hers. She knew it like the back of her hand. Every piece of equipment, every weapon, every tool, she had used it 1,000 times before. This was her world, the world of shadows and silence, the world where she had once thrived, and tonight it was hers again. The helicopter touched down in the barren desert with a soft thud, the rotor, blades still spinning as Eden and the rest of the team disembarked. The night was thick, the air dry and heavy with the scent of dust. The base camp had disappeared from sight as soon as they left the safety of its perimeter. The sound of the helicopter now just a fading echo in the vast emptiness. Eden adjusted the straps of her pack, feeling the weight of the night's mission pressing down on her. The men around her, silent and ready, didn't need to speak. They were all veterans, trained to operate in silence and with precision, and tonight precision was everything. The target was high risk. No one had been able to confirm the location of the enemy cell, but the intel was enough to send them in. Their job was simple: infiltrate, retrieve the intelligence, and get out. But they all knew that simplicity was an illusion. No mission like this was ever as straightforward as it seemed. As the team moved out, Eden felt the familiar pull of the darkness. It was a comfort in many ways. The anonymity it offered, the way it could swallow them whole. But tonight, there was something else in the air. It wasn't just the weight of the mission. It was the ghosts. They had followed her all this time. They were here just as they always had been. She had tried to ignore them, to lock them away in the corners of her mind, but tonight she could feel them again. The faces of the men who had fallen alongside her, Marcus Chen, Jacob Reyes, Aaron Cross, their memories like a heavy cloak wrapped around her shoulders. The memories had never stopped haunting her. Even now they were with her. But there was no room for weakness on this mission. No room for hesitation. The team moved in formation, their footsteps synchronized, the only sound the soft crunch of sand beneath their boots. Eden stayed at the rear, her eyes scanning the dark landscape ahead. She didn't need to look at the others, she could feel their presence. Each member of the team knew their role, knew what was at stake. They approached the compound, a cluster of buildings nestled against the edge of the rocky cliffside. It was heavily guarded, but Eden wasn't worried. She had done this before. The plan was simple, but the execution had to be flawless. They'd been briefed on the layout, the security measures, and the number of hostiles inside, but none of that mattered now. They were in the thick of it, and nothing would go as planned. The enemy always adapted, always found ways to complicate things. The trick was to stay one step ahead. Eden motioned for the team to halt as they reached the compound's perimeter. Her fingers brushed the cool steel of her rifle, the familiar weight reassuring her. She had always relied on her instincts, and tonight those instincts were sharper than ever. With a swift hand signal, the team split into two groups. Eden and her partner, Leo Delgado, moved to the left, while the others circled around to the right. They had been trained for this. The precision, the silence, the ability to work in perfect coordination without a single word. Eden's heart beat steadily in her chest as they crept toward the compound's outer walls. She could feel the adrenaline starting to surge through her, the familiar rush of danger that always came before a mission like this. But there was something different about tonight. It wasn't just the mission, it wasn't just the ghosts. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite place. As they reached the outer wall, Leo signaled for her to stop. Eden crouched low, her body tense. Every muscle in her frame prepared for the fight she knew was coming. She could hear voices now, muffled but distinct, coming from inside the compound. It was time. With a single swift motion, Eden activated her comms, signaling the rest of the team. "We move on my count," she whispered into the mic. The countdown was silent, but every soldier knew the drill. They had been through this before. 3, 2, 1. The team sprang into action. Eden moved swiftly, her body a blur of motion as she scaled the wall, her boots finding footholds in the rocky surface. The others followed in quick succession, all of them moving as one, as if they were all part of a single well-oiled machine. Once they were on top of the wall, Eden dropped to the ground on the other side, her rifle aimed and ready. She signaled to Leo, who was already moving into position, taking cover behind a stack of crates. The compound was quiet now, too quiet. Eden moved forward, her eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. She didn't trust silence. Silence always meant something was about to go wrong. As they approached the main building, Eden's instincts flared. Something wasn't right. She could feel it in her gut, a warning, a shift in the atmosphere. "Hold," she whispered into the comms. The team froze in place, their movements slowing as they listened for any sounds that might indicate danger. Then, just as Eden was about to move again, a flash of movement caught her eye. A figure darting across the compound, silhouetted against the dim light of the surrounding landscape. A guard. Eden's hand instinctively went to her sidearm, but she hesitated. Something didn't add up. The guard's movements were too deliberate, too calm. It didn't feel like an ordinary patrol. The figure stopped and turned, as if sensing their presence. Eden's heart skipped a beat, but she remained still, waiting. It wasn't until the guard's voice rang out, low but clear, that Eden realized what was happening. "Move in," the voice said, its tone cold and commanding. The moment the words left the guard's mouth, the compound came alive. The doors of the building slammed open, and a dozen armed men poured into the courtyard. They had been waiting. They had known they were coming. A trap. "Go, go, go!" Eden barked into her comms, but she already knew it was too late. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Eden's team returned fire, but the enemy had them outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. Eden's mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. They had been careful. They had planned for everything, but nothing could prepare them for this. Nothing could prepare them for an ambush of this magnitude. She moved swiftly, her rifle snapping into place as she took out two enemy soldiers in quick succession. Her breath was steady, her body moving on autopilot, the familiar rhythm of combat taking over. But even as she fought, she could feel the pull of the past. The ghosts were back, walking beside her once more, just as they always had. She didn't have time to think about them now. She didn't have time for anything except survival. "Fall back!" Leo shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Eden glanced at him, and for the first time since the mission started, she saw the fear in his eyes. They had underestimated the enemy. They had walked right into a trap. But Eden didn't hesitate. She didn't back down. "We finish this," she said, her voice low and fierce. She wasn't going to let them die here. Not again. Not after everything. The battle raged around Eden as she moved with precision, her mind focused entirely on the enemy. Each shot was calculated, every movement deliberate. The world around her seemed to slow as her instincts took over, the years of training and experience flowing through her veins. But beneath that calm exterior, something was shifting. A sense of dread had crept in, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. The ambush had thrown everything off course. What had been a straightforward extraction mission had turned into a nightmare. The enemy was too well prepared, and they were relentless. Their superior numbers and firepower left Eden and her team on the defensive, constantly scrambling to hold their ground. "Eden, we need to pull back!" Leo's voice crackled through her earpiece. His urgency was palpable, and for a moment she considered it. But something inside her refused to let them retreat. She had faced worse. She had lost brothers in far more hellish situations. This wouldn't be the time to back down, not when they were so close. "No," she said firmly, her voice steady. "We push forward. We finish the mission." The silence that followed was thick with tension. Leo didn't argue. He knew better than to question her in moments like this. She had made her decision. They were going to fight, even if it cost them everything. The sound of gunfire echoed through the night, the crack of sniper rounds whizzing past her, the hiss of grenades exploding in the distance. But Eden didn't flinch. She focused on the task at hand, moving from cover to cover, each step calculated, each shot precise. Her team was with her, pushing forward with the same relentless determination. They were soldiers after all, and soldiers never gave up. But with every passing minute, the pressure mounted. The enemy wasn't just fighting back, they were fighting smarter, anticipating their moves. It was clear they had prepared for this. They knew the team would be coming. Someone had betrayed them. Someone had tipped them off. The thought gnawed at Eden as she moved, but there was no time to dwell on it now. The mission had to be completed, no matter the cost. She rounded a corner, her rifle raised, eyes scanning the darkened courtyard for movement. The dim moonlight did little to illuminate the area, but her instincts guided her. She saw him before he saw her. An enemy soldier crouched behind a stack of crates, his rifle aimed at the advancing team. Without hesitation, she pulled the trigger. The soldier dropped, a clean shot to the chest. "Two down," she whispered into her comms. "We're making progress," Leo responded, "but we're not out yet." No, they weren't out yet. And the more she fought, the more she realized just how badly they had underestimated their enemies. There was something off about this whole operation. The ease with which the ambush had been set, the way the enemy was organized. They weren't just another group of militants, they were something more. And Eden knew it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a loud explosion, the shockwave hitting her like a physical blow. She was knocked off balance, but she quickly regained her footing. The blast had come from the main building, the heart of the compound. That was where the intelligence was being stored. That was where their mission was supposed to end. She signaled to her team, a quick hand motion to let them know what had just happened. They didn't hesitate. They knew what they had to do. "We're moving in," she ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Cover me." With synchronized precision, the team moved forward, their rifles raised as they advanced on the building. The sounds of battle faded into the background as their focus narrowed. They were so close now, they could feel it. As they neared the entrance to the building, Eden's heart raced. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, but there was something else, something deeper. A nagging feeling that this was it. This was where everything would come to a head. The moment that would determine the fate of everyone involved. She signaled for the team to stop as they reached the door. She glanced at the others, each one ready for what was to come. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. "On three," Eden said, her voice low. 1, 2, 3. The team stormed the building, their rifles raised, clearing each room with precision. The air inside was thick, the tension almost unbearable. Eden's senses were on high alert, every muscle in her body coiled and ready for anything. They moved swiftly through the building, methodical, relentless, as if they had done this 1,000 times before. But just as they were about to reach the room where the intelligence was being stored, something unexpected happened. The lights flickered, and the door to the command center slammed shut with a resounding crash. Eden's heart skipped a beat. She didn't have to look at her team to know what they were thinking. A trap. Again, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind the door, and then the voice. "I knew you'd come," the voice sneered, cold and mocking. "But you're too late." Eden's blood ran cold. She didn't recognize the voice, but the words hit her like a punch to the gut. The betrayal was clear. Someone on the inside had turned on them. Someone had set them up to fail. The door to the command center opened slowly, and there, standing in front of them, was a man she hadn't seen in years, a face from her past. "Surprised to see me, Wolf?" he asked, his voice dripping with venom. Eden's mind raced, her body tense as she stared at him. The man was dressed in black tactical gear, a rifle slung across his back. But it wasn't the gear that caught her attention. It was the smile. The cold, knowing smile that sent a chill down her spine. "Jackson," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jackson smirked, stepping forward. I thought you'd recognize me. You and your team were always so good at taking down the wrong targets. But not this time. This time, you're the ones who are going down." Eden's mind was reeling. Jackson had been part of her unit once, a trusted ally, a brother in arms. But somewhere along the way, he had disappeared. No one knew what had happened to him until now. The realization hit her like a hammer. Jackson had been the traitor all along. He had sold them out. "Why?" Eden asked, her voice low and filled with disbelief. "Why betray us?" Jackson's smile faded, his expression turning cold. "For power, for money, for control. You wouldn't understand, Wolf. You're too loyal, too idealistic." Eden's eyes narrowed. Not anymore. The tension in the room was unbearable. Eden's team was ready for a fight, their weapons raised, but she held them back. This wasn't just another mission. This was personal. Jackson's eyes flicked to the side, and suddenly the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them in the room with Jackson. The walls seemed to close in as Eden's thoughts swirled. She was face to face with her past, and this time she wouldn't run. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in around Eden. Jackson stood before her, his expression a twisted mix of smug satisfaction and cold indifference. The once familiar face of a comrade was now a symbol of everything Eden had fought against. He was the betrayal she had never seen coming, a face from her past that she had trusted with her life, and now a man who had sold everything they had fought for. Her team was tense, rifles aimed at Jackson, but Eden held up a hand signaling them to hold. This was her battle, her past. The rest of them were just collateral. "You disappeared," Eden said, her voice low but filled with accusation. "We thought you were dead. How long have you been playing us, Jackson?" He chuckled, the sound of it cold and hollow. "You really think you're the only one who knows how to survive, Wolf? I did what I had to do. The world's changed, and I'm on the winning side now." The betrayal in his voice was like a knife twisting in her chest. He had been part of the very unit that had once meant everything to her. They had bled together, fought together, and now he stood before her as a traitor, a shadow of the man he once was. "What are you talking about? You're working with the enemy?" Eden asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even though the rage was building inside her. "No," Jackson replied, a twisted grin forming on his face. "I'm working for myself now, and I've got the power to make sure things go my way. You and your team, you're just pawns in a much bigger game." Eden's mind raced. The betrayal stung, but she couldn't afford to let it cloud her judgment. This was bigger than Jackson. It had always been bigger than any one mission, any one individual. She had always known there were forces at play beyond her control, but this was a whole new level of deception. "Why now?" Eden demanded. "Why come after us now, after all this time? You had your chance to disappear, to fade into the background. Why drag us into this mess?" Jackson's eyes narrowed. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Eden. Always thinking you're better than the rest of us. Always thinking you're on some moral high ground. I'm tired of it. Tired of playing by your rules. Now you play by mine." The implications of his words hit her like a freight train. He wasn't just working for himself. He had a bigger plan. A plan that involved them, her team, and everything they had fought for. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about something far more dangerous. "I never thought you'd be this low," Eden said, her voice breaking through the tension in the room. "But I should have known. You always were the one willing to do whatever it took." "Exactly," Jackson replied, his smile widening. "You're finally starting to get it." The cold realization settled in. Eden knew what she had to do. She knew that Jackson wasn't just an obstacle. He was a danger to everything she had fought for, to everything her team had fought for. He was the enemy now. With a swift motion, Eden raised her rifle, taking aim at Jackson. Her hand was steady, her focus unwavering. The shot was clear in her mind. But then something stopped her. A flash of memory, a moment long buried. A time when Jackson had been more than just a soldier. He had been a friend, a brother in arms. And now she was about to pull the trigger on him. "Don't!" Leo's voice crackled through her earpiece. "We're not like him. We don't do this." Eden's fingers trembled slightly on the trigger. The conflict inside her was raw, sharp. She had trained her whole life to be a weapon, to do what needed to be done, no questions asked. But this was different. This was personal. "He's not the man we knew, Leo," Eden said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "He's already dead to me." Without another word, Eden took the shot. The bullet hit Jackson square in the chest, and he collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. The room fell silent. The only sound was the rush of Eden's breath, quick and shallow. She stared at him, her mind still processing what had just happened. For a moment, everything around her stopped. The world seemed to freeze. The anger, the betrayal, the years of pain. They all came crashing down on her at once. She had killed him. She had killed someone she had once called a friend. "Let's move." Leo's voice broke through the silence, his tone firm, but not without the weight of the moment. Eden nodded, her hands still trembling as she lowered her rifle. "Yeah, we move." The team moved quickly, their mission now more urgent than ever. Eden's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but there was one that stood out among the rest. They had to finish this. They couldn't afford to stop. Not now. Not when they were so close. They made their way deeper into the compound, the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing through the night. But it wasn't just the mission anymore. It wasn't just about getting the intelligence or escaping the enemy. It was about survival. It was about proving that they weren't just pawns in Jackson's game. They were soldiers, and they would not fall. Eden could feel the weight of the mission bearing down on her, but she pushed it aside. There was no time to dwell on what had just happened. She had made the decision. It had been the only decision, but that didn't make it any easier. As the team neared the final room, the door heavy and reinforced, Eden's heart began to race. This was it, the final phase of the operation. The intelligence was inside. They had to get in, get the data, and get out. There were no other options. With a nod to Leo, Eden motioned for the team to take position. They were ready. "On my mark," Eden whispered. She knew this wasn't just about the mission. It was about taking back control. It was about standing firm, even when the world seemed to crumble around them. She wasn't going to let Jackson or anyone else dictate the rules anymore. They had a job to finish, and they would finish it. The door was breached in a matter of seconds, and the team flooded into the room. But it wasn't the sight of the intelligence that stopped Eden in her tracks. It was the figure standing in the center of the room, a woman. Eden's mind raced as she recognized the figure. Her heart skipped a beat. "Rebecca," she whispered, almost to herself. Eden stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes locked on the woman in the middle of the room. Her heart skipped a beat as the rush of memories flooded her mind. Rebecca. It was impossible. She had watched her fall, seen her die in a firefight years ago. Yet here she was, standing in front of Eden, as if nothing had changed. Eden's mind raced. She had seen Rebecca's body. She had been there when they buried her. And now this? How? Why? The room around her seemed to narrow. The walls felt like they were closing in as confusion and disbelief crashed over her. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her fingers tightened around her rifle as she tried to process the impossible sight in front of her. "Rebecca?" Eden managed to whisper, the word barely escaping her lips. It was a question, but there was no real hope in her voice, just the raw edge of disbelief. The woman before her, Rebecca, or who Eden thought was Rebecca, smiled softly. The familiar warmth that Eden remembered in her friend was gone, replaced with a chilling emptiness. "It's me, Eden," Rebecca replied, her voice eerily calm. "I'm back." Eden's grip tightened, but she didn't raise the rifle. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening. How are you alive?" Eden asked, her voice tinged with suspicion, fear creeping into her tone. Rebecca took a step closer, her boots silent against the concrete floor. She wasn't moving like the soldier Eden once knew. Her steps were slow, deliberate, and there was something in her eyes, something cold, calculated, and distant. "That doesn't matter anymore," Rebecca said. "What matters is where you go from here." Eden's chest tightened, the weight of the moment pressing on her. Her mind was still grappling with the idea that Rebecca had somehow survived, had somehow returned from the dead, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. Not now. Not when the mission still hung in the balance. "Why?" Eden asked, her voice low, filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. "Why did you do it? Why did you disappear? You were one of us. You were part of Ghost Team Delta. You were my sister in arms." Rebecca's expression shifted, and for the briefest moment there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something human. But it was gone before Eden could grasp it. "I was never one of you, Eden," Rebecca said, her voice cold and flat. "Not really. I was always playing a part, and I'm not the person you think I am." Eden's pulse quickened. This wasn't the Rebecca she had fought beside. This wasn't the woman who had bled and sacrificed alongside her. This was something else, something dangerous. And Eden wasn't going to let her get away with it. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm done playing along," Eden snapped, stepping forward, her rifle raised slightly. Rebecca's eyes flicked to the other members of Eden's team who had started to move into the room. They had followed Eden's lead, keeping a careful distance, waiting for her orders. They were just as confused as she was, but they trusted her. They always did. "Don't do this, Eden," Rebecca said, her voice soft but firm. "You still don't understand what's at stake." Eden's gaze didn't waver. "No, I understand perfectly. You turned your back on everything we stood for, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of gunfire shattered the silence. The doors of the room slammed shut with a deafening bang, and the room was plunged into chaos. The team scattered, taking cover behind the few pieces of equipment in the room as soldiers poured in from every direction. The ambush wasn't over. It had only just begun. Eden's heart raced, her mind shifting into battle mode. She had no choice now. She had to protect her team, no matter what. But as the firefight erupted around them, Eden couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here. The betrayal, the lies, the return of Rebecca, none of it made sense. But there was no time to process it. "Focus," she shouted to her team, her voice sharp. "We need to get to the intel. Cover the exits, now." Gunfire rang out, and Eden's instincts kicked in. She moved swiftly, her rifle aimed and steady, taking down enemy soldiers as they emerged from behind cover. Her team followed her lead, returning fire with precision, their movements synchronized. But as Eden fought, her mind couldn't stop racing. There was something deeper at play here, something beyond the mission, beyond the betrayal. Rebecca's return wasn't just an accident, it was a calculated move. Eden's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp cry from Leo. He had been hit. A bullet grazed his side, and he stumbled, falling to the ground. "Leo!" Eden shouted, rushing to his side. He gritted his teeth, his face pale, but he managed a weak smile. "I'm fine, just a scratch," he said. But Eden could see the blood seeping through his shirt. She didn't have time to argue. "Stay here," she ordered. "I'll cover you." Eden moved back into the fray, her focus sharper than ever. She needed to end this. They needed to get out of here, but as the minutes dragged on, the enemy seemed to multiply. They had underestimated their opponents, and now they were paying the price. The room was a war zone. Bullets whizzed past, ricocheting off metal and concrete. The sound of the gunfire was deafening, and Eden's senses were on high alert. But still, she couldn't shake the thought of Rebecca, of what she had said, of the way she had looked at her. Rebecca was involved in this, Eden was sure of it. But the question was, how? Eden's mind snapped back to the present as she saw an enemy soldier aiming at her. Without thinking, she pulled the trigger, dropping him in a clean shot. But there were more, always more. "Where the hell are they coming from?" Leo's voice came through her earpiece. "We need to find the source," Eden replied, scanning the room for any sign of where the enemy was coming from. She spotted a set of stairs leading up to a second level and motioned for her team to follow. "We take the high ground," she said. "Cover all the angles. Get to the intel before they do." As they moved up the stairs, the tension in the air was palpable. The room below was now under heavy fire, but Eden knew they had no choice. They had to push forward. When they reached the second floor, Eden's heart sank. There, standing in the middle of the room, was Rebecca. She was calm, her posture relaxed, as if she were waiting for them. "Did you really think you could just waltz in and take what's mine?" Rebecca asked, her voice like ice. Eden's grip on her rifle tightened. "This ends now, Rebecca." The two women stood facing each other, the weight of their history pressing down on them. There was no going back now. This wasn't just about the mission. This was about a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound. Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You can't stop it. It's already too late." Eden didn't hesitate. "I'm not leaving without that intel. Then you'll die trying," Rebecca said, raising her weapon. The tension between Eden and Rebecca was suffocating. The two women stood in the middle of the room, eyes locked, guns raised. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Eden's mind was racing. There was no room for hesitation now, not with everything on the line. Rebecca's eyes were cold, her smile unsettling. "You really think you can walk out of here with that intel?" she asked, her voice chillingly calm. "You've already lost." Eden's grip on her rifle tightened. "Not yet," she said, her voice steady despite the maelstrom of emotions inside her. The room was quiet now, save for the muffled sounds of gunfire from below. The fight was still raging downstairs, but Eden knew this was where the real battle lay. The personal betrayal, the ghosts of the past, the chance to stop the chaos before it spiraled even further. "You've changed, Rebecca," Eden said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But not in the way I thought you would." Rebecca tilted her head slightly, as if genuinely curious. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You were never this cold," Eden replied. "You used to care. You used to fight for the right reasons." Rebecca's expression flickered for a second, but then it was gone, replaced by that same unnerving smile. "I grew up, Eden. You should try it sometime." Eden couldn't believe what she was hearing. The woman standing before her was a stranger, someone who had been a sister in arms, someone who had shared the same blood, sweat, and tears. Now she was just another enemy, a traitor who had chosen power over everything they had fought for. "How many people have you betrayed to get here?" Eden asked, her voice tight with anger. How many of you sold out to climb higher? This isn't you, Rebecca. This isn't what we fought for. Rebecca's eyes darkened, and for a moment Eden saw a flicker of something in them. Regret, maybe? Or was it fear? But it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold, calculated look that Eden had grown to despise. You don't understand, Rebecca said, her voice quieter now, almost as if she was speaking to herself. This was never about what we fought for. It was always about survival. You know that, right? This world isn't the same as it was when we started. It's a different game now. Eden shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. You're wrong. The world hasn't changed. We have. We became something we never wanted to be, and now you're just trying to justify it. Rebecca didn't respond. Instead, she leveled her rifle at Eden, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. I gave up my past to secure a future, Eden. The future you were too blind to see. Eden's heart pounded in her chest as she stared down the barrel of Rebecca's gun. She knew what she had to do. She had known from the moment Rebecca stepped into this room that there could only be one way this ended. The truth was, it had never been about the mission or the intel. It had always been about this moment. The moment she had to choose between her past and her future. I'm not going to let you destroy everything we built, Eden said, her voice cold, her resolve unwavering. Rebecca's lips curled into a mocking smile. You think you can stop me? You think you can stop this plan? You're too late, Wolf. It's already in motion. Eden took a slow breath, keeping her eyes locked on Rebecca's. She knew she had one shot at this, one shot to end it all before Rebecca could pull the trigger. She had trained for moments like this. Years of hard lessons, years of surviving the impossible. This was no different. Let me guess, Eden said, her tone laced with sarcasm. You're going to say it was never personal. Just business, right? Rebecca's gaze hardened. Business is personal. Eden's finger tightened around the trigger, her mind a whirl of thoughts. But something inside her told her to wait. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She wasn't just fighting to bring down a traitor. This was bigger than that. The sound of gunfire downstairs grew louder, the chaos outside seeping into the walls. But still, Eden stood there, locked in a silent standoff with Rebecca. Neither of them moved, neither of them blinked. Time seemed to stretch, the weight of the past pressing down on both of them. Do you remember what you used to believe in? Eden asked quietly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Do you remember who you were before you became this? Rebecca's expression softened for a fraction of a second, the mask slipping, but just as quickly, it was gone. She didn't answer. Instead, she leveled her rifle at Eden once more, her eyes cold and calculating. Eden didn't flinch. She didn't lower her weapon. She knew this was the moment she would either win or lose everything. Suddenly, the door behind them burst open, and Eden's team stormed into the room, their rifles raised. They were ready to finish the fight, to end the mission, to bring back the intel that had cost them so much. But Eden didn't move. She didn't even look at them. She only had eyes for Rebecca. Let them in, Rebecca said with a sneer, lowering her rifle. It's over, Eden. You know that, don't you? Eden hesitated, her finger still on the trigger, her mind racing. The battle outside had spilled into the room. Her team was positioned, guns trained, ready for the next move. But this was her fight, her final decision. Eden's grip tightened, the cold metal of the rifle feeling like a weight she couldn't shake. She wasn't going to let Rebecca win. Not this time. Not after everything. With one fluid motion, she raised her rifle, taking aim. The shot rang out. The room was silent for a moment. The echoes of the shot hung in the air, sharp and final. Rebecca collapsed to the ground, the life draining from her eyes. The betrayal, the lies, everything that had led to this moment was over. There was no more silence, no more words, only the heavy weight of what Eden had done. Her team moved in immediately, securing the area, checking for any remaining threats. But Eden stood still, her rifle lowered, her gaze fixed on the body of the woman who had once been a sister in arms. The room felt cold, too quiet. The mission was over, but the price of victory had been steep. Eden closed her eyes, taking a slow breath, letting the weight of the moment settle over her. She had lost more than just a team member. She had lost a part of herself, the part that had believed in the mission, in the brotherhood, in the fight. But there was no going back now. The ghosts were gone. The past was behind her, and for the first time in a long time, Eden Wolf was free. As the dust settled and the mission came to an end, the silence that followed was deafening. Eden stood over the battlefield, the weight of the decisions she had made heavy on her shoulders. There were no medals, no grand gestures, just the quiet aftermath of a battle fought and won. The ghosts of the past had been laid to rest, but the price of survival was never easy. Thank you for watching the story of Eden Wolf, a story about loyalty, betrayal, and the true cost of survival. If this tale left an impact on you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Eden's journey resonated the most? Drop a comment below and share your reflections with us. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss another gripping tale from VeteranBiker. Every story uncovers something deeper, a truth, a legacy, or a warrior hidden in plain sight. And don't forget, ride with purpose, live with honor, and keep the ghosts of your past close. They may be the ones who guide you through the darkest moments. Until next time,